They told me I died. That's the cruel irony. I was alive, breathing and bleeding on a hospital bed, while my sister planned my funeral in whispers and walked away with my child in her arms. I remember the moment I woke up as vividly as I remember the sound of my daughter's first cry, because I never heard it. All I remember was pain, searing and unbearable, followed by darkness. When I opened my eyes again, my mother's face was pale, her lips trembling as she whispered, "The baby, she didn't make it." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I wanted to rip my chest open to find the child I knew had existed. The child I had carried. The child I had named Lila. They told me she was gone. A stillbirth. Complications. Some cold, clinical term that stole motherhood from me before I could even hold her. But the worst betrayal wasn't the hospital. It wasn't the doctor who wouldn't look me in the eye. It wasn't even the death certificate I was forced to sign, hands shaking, dreams crumbling. It was Talia. My own sister. My blood. My best friend. She held me while I sobbed. She picked out the urn. She wept louder than anyone at the fake memorial she insisted we hold for closure. Thought it was grief. But now I see it clearly, it was guilt. Because 3 years later I saw her. Not Talia. Not even the child. I saw me. I was in the checkout line at a grocery store, waiting to buy a frozen dinner I didn't really want, when I heard a girl laugh, bright, musical, familiar in a way that knocked the wind out of me. I turned. There she was. A little girl, bouncing on her toes, clutching a box of cereal. Big brown eyes. A little scar above her lip I hadn't noticed before. But her smile. That was mine. And her voice? She called out, "Mommy." And Talia, my sister, my Judas, answered. Let me rewind. My name is Cassidy Monroe. I was 27 when I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl who never got a birth certificate. I was told she died, and I grieved her as fiercely as any mother would. But the truth is she lived, and for 7 years she was raised just a few miles from me, calling someone else mommy. Someone who once promised to protect me. Someone who held my hand while I screamed through labor, then stole the life I brought into this world. I didn't realize how deep betrayal could go until I saw that video. A viral clip shared by one of my coworkers during a lunch break. Talia, in her Sunday best, standing on a stage at a community event, receiving a plaque for being a hero mother for adopting a child abandoned at birth. Adopted? Abandoned? I stared at the child's face. Freckles across her nose. Wide, innocent eyes. She looked like me. No, she was me. He was mine. I excused myself. Locked myself in the office bathroom. Vomited into the sink. Then I collapsed onto the floor as everything inside me came undone. I had been robbed. Not just of my child. Of the most sacred bond a woman can have. Of her first word. Her first step. Her tiny hand reaching for mine. All stolen, wrapped in ribbons of lies, and presented to the world as my sister's act of kindness. That day something inside me changed. I stopped grieving. And I started hunting. The hospital wouldn't give me answers. It's been years, they said. Records may be archived. But I pushed. I went back to that room where I last remembered breathing as a mother. I requested files. I tracked down nurses. I filed Freedom of Information requests. And bit by bit the puzzle started to fall into place. There was no stillbirth recorded in my name. There was, however, an emergency C-section followed by a private adoption. Signed off by someone who was not me. Talia had connections. She worked in administration at the time. She knew the system. She knew how to bend it, break it, and bury the evidence. She also knew how to keep me medicated long enough to believe it all. But here's the thing about grief. It buries you, but it also prepares you for war. And I was ready to make every lie crumble. Because now I knew the truth. And soon everyone else would too. I never knew I could be so calm and so dangerous at the same time. That night, after watching the video over and over again, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't call Talia. I just sat in the dark of my small apartment, listening to the radiator clank and hiss like it was whispering secrets back to me. My fingers clenched the armrest and the truth pounded in my skull like a war drum. She stole my daughter. She told the world I was dead. And they believed her. It didn't happen by accident. You don't accidentally erase someone's existence. It takes planning. It takes motive. It takes a certain kind of evil. And now it was my turn to plan. I started gathering receipts, literally. I dug into everything I could find on Talia. She worked at the hospital where I gave birth. She'd taken a temporary leave 2 weeks before I went into labor, claimed it was to help her grieving sister. A leave she never returned from. Instead, she moved into a nicer house. In a better school district. With money she didn't have before. Her social media was a shrine to motherhood. Photos of Lila at the park at preschool graduation, on Halloween dressed as a tiny vet. Every post got dozens of likes, most saying the same thing. You're such a wonderful mom, Talia. Lila's so lucky to have you. It's amazing how you adopted her. She looks just like you too. I still can't believe your sister passed. God knew what he was doing. And in every comment I was a ghost. Rumor. Myth. She told everyone I died. That's why she could raise Lila without questions. That's why she never worried I'd come knocking. If I was about to. The next day I drove by her house. It was a cute little cottage on the edge of town with pink flamingos in the yard and wind chimes on the porch. Her car, a white crossover SUV, was parked in the driveway. It had a bumper sticker that read, "Proud Adoptive Mama." I parked a few houses down and waited. At 3:17 p.m. the school bus dropped Lila off. My baby. My little girl. Her hair was in 2 puffs with pink bows and she was wearing a backpack with Disney princesses. She ran up the steps and threw herself into Talia's arms. My sister? She smiled like she'd earned it. Like she deserved it. My nails dug into the steering wheel. But I couldn't barge in. Not yet. I needed more than suspicion. More than rage. I needed proof. That night I paid a visit to an old friend, Denise. She used to be a nurse at the same hospital where I delivered. We'd fallen out of touch after Lila was stillborn, because I'd cut everyone off. Everyone reminded me of what I'd lost. When she opened the door, her eyes widened. Cass. She looked older, tired but kind. She hugged me tightly like someone hugging a ghost. I thought you moved away, she whispered. Talia said. She lied. I cut her off. About everything. We sat down in her kitchen and I spilled everything. The fake stillbirth. The false adoption. The video. The little girl who had my smile and Talia's last name. At first, Denise looked horrified. Then she looked like she wanted to kill someone. She was always around the nurse's station during your labor, Denise whispered. I thought she was just worried, but now that you say this, it makes sense. There were charts moved around. Paperwork going missing. I remember asking why your discharge papers looked rushed. Do you remember who delivered Lila? I asked. She nodded. Dr. Linton. He left the country 2 years ago. Damn. But, she hesitated, then leaned in. I do know someone in records. She owes me a favor. If anyone can find a copy of your original birth file, before it was lost, it's her. Hope bloomed in my chest for the first time in years. 2 days later, Denise handed me a manila envelope. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, a photocopy of the original file. Mother. Cassidy Monroe. Infant, female. Live birth. APGAR score, 8.1. Birth time, 3:47 a.m. Delivery method, C-section. Signed release, Talia Monroe, power of attorney. My blood ran cold. There was a forged power of attorney. My signature misspelled. My rights wiped away. She told them I was incapacitated, I whispered. That I had no next of kin. That I didn't want the baby. My voice cracked. I'd never wanted anything more in my life. I looked up at Denise, tears burning behind my eyes. This is it. I can prove it. I can take her to court. Denise squeezed my hand. You can do more than that. You can take your daughter back. But I knew I had to be careful. Talia was loved in that town. Respected. She had a house, a stable job, and everyone believed her version of events. I was the dead sister. The junkie. The unstable one who never recovered. I had to rebuild everything. My credibility. My image. My legal standing. And most importantly, my bond with Lila. Because I couldn't just yank her out of that house. She didn't know me. She didn't remember me. And as much as I wanted revenge, I needed something more. A second chance at being her mother. And I was going to get it, piece by piece. Starting with the one thing Talia never thought I'd find. My voice. I couldn't stop thinking about how easily they erased me. How quickly my identity had been stolen, my motherhood dismissed, and my pain brushed aside. Every night, I lay awake, haunted by the sound of my baby's cry the last time I held her. That sound was etched into my soul. And now that I knew who took her, I couldn't sit in silence any longer. I started investigating the family, Elena and Ben. They had moved a few towns away and changed their last names. It wasn't hard to track them. People loved to show off online, and despite the crimes they'd committed, they had no shame. There she was, my daughter, on their social media. She looked just like me. The shape of her nose, the curve of her chin. It was all me. I cried the first time I saw her birthday photos. Not because they were celebrating her, but because I wasn't there. They'd named her Ava. Not the name I chose. They never gave me the chance. But I didn't want to confront them just yet. I needed proof. I needed irrefutable evidence that my baby was switched and raised by the wrong people. I reached out to the hospital again, this time with the help of a lawyer friend. I was done being polite. I needed the nurse who helped me that day. Her name was Gloria. I remembered her badge, the way her hand trembled when she held mine. She knew something was wrong even back then. Gloria was no longer working at the hospital, but after weeks of calls and emails I found her. She'd moved states after the incident, claimed she couldn't stay after what happened. When we finally spoke, her voice broke as soon as she heard my name. "I've been waiting for this day," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I wanted to speak up, but I was silenced." I listened as she confessed everything. How she saw Elena enter the maternity ward, dressed as a nurse, holding false credentials. How the baby in my room was swapped while I was still unconscious. And how she reported it, only for her concerns to be buried by the hospital board. They claimed there was no foul play. Her contract was quietly terminated weeks later. "I knew it wasn't right," she said. "But I was threatened. I thought you'd come forward eventually. I prayed you'd come." Her voice shook with guilt, and I told her she wasn't to blame. We were both victims of a family that believed they were untouchable. But not anymore. With Gloria's sworn statement and surveillance footage she'd secretly kept. Yes, she had downloaded clips of Elena entering unauthorized areas. We finally had the start of a case. I filed a police report. I presented everything. The hospital tried to stonewall again, but my lawyer pushed hard. He subpoenaed the records, demanded accountability. Suddenly, people began to talk. The security footage was mysteriously damaged, but Gloria's backup clips told enough of the story. I sat in court hearings with shaking hands and a racing heart. Elena and Ben were arrogant at first, smirking, holding hands, acting like they were protecting their daughter. But when Gloria walked into the courtroom, their smiles fell. She was the wild card they hadn't expected. Her testimony was powerful, and when she handed over her hidden recordings, audio files of her conversations with administrators about the switch, everything shifted. They were now facing charges of child abduction, identity fraud, and medical impersonation. Elena cried in court, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not one bit. She stole my child, my life, and tried to walk away like I didn't matter. But justice was only part of the journey. The harder part was Ava. She was only 5 now. Still so young, and yet she'd lived her whole life knowing them as her parents. How would I even begin to explain the truth? Would she even want to know me? Or would she cry at the sight of the woman claiming to be her real mother? I didn't want to tear her world apart, but I also couldn't let her grow up in a lie. So I wrote her letters. Every day. Letters she wouldn't read yet, but maybe someday. I wrote about the day she was born, how I held her tiny hand and promised her the world. I wrote about the emptiness that filled me when she was gone, and the fire that pushed me to find her again. I wrote about lullabies and dreams, about the nursery that waited for her all these years. And when the time came to see her face to face, I'd be ready. But for now I waited. The court ordered a temporary separation from Elena and Ben. Ava was placed in the care of a child psychologist and a foster guardian while the truth unraveled. I visited her once, under supervision. She looked confused when she saw me. I didn't expect a miracle. I didn't expect her to run into my arms. She sat quietly, coloring. I introduced myself as a friend, and I gave her a small bunny plush I'd kept all these years. She held it close and smiled faintly. That was enough. That glimmer of recognition. Maybe it was nothing. Or maybe it was something deep in her soul remembering the mother she once knew. But I knew this was far from over. Because Ben and Elena weren't done fighting. And the worst was still ahead. It wasn't just about my baby anymore. It was about justice, for her and for the mother I used to be. The moment I stepped into that courtroom, everything around me faded. The rows of benches, the wood-paneled walls, the dull hum of murmured voices. All of it became a blur. I could only hear my heartbeat, thudding so loudly it drowned everything else out. On the other side of the room sat the woman who had taken everything from me. Margaret. Dressed like a saint, posture rigid, eyes calculating. She had aged, yes, but she still had that coldness etched deep into her face. And beside her, holding her hand tightly, was Lily. My Lily. The child I had carried for 9 months, loved for a lifetime and lost to a lie. It had taken me 4 grueling years to gather every piece of evidence I needed. Years of digging, hiring private investigators, saving every penny to build a legal case. I'd collected nurse testimonies, forged documents, security footage archives, most of which had mysteriously gone missing. But what I did have was DNA. The truth was in our blood. The court had ordered a new test, one she couldn't tamper with this time. When the judge asked if I had anything to say, my legs trembled. But I stood. My daughter was stolen from me, I began, my voice shaking at first but gaining strength. She didn't die at birth like they claimed. She was taken. Raised under a lie by someone I trusted, someone who watched me cry myself to sleep every night and never said a word. That's not just deceit. That's cruelty. I turned to face Margaret then. Her expression didn't flicker. Not once. She looked me in the eye. At my daughter's fake funeral, I continued. She held me while I broke. And all the while she was keeping her secret warm in her arms. That child belonged with me. And today the truth will finally speak louder than her lies. Lily squirmed in her seat. I knew she didn't understand the weight of what was happening. She was too young. To her, Margaret was the only mother she'd ever known. And that was the part that hurt the most. Margaret had had years to be her hero, to teach her first words, to walk her to kindergarten. All I had were memories of a pink nursery and unopened baby clothes. The judge called for recess before reading the results. Those next 10 minutes felt like eternity. I sat in the hallway alone. My attorney advised I stay calm no matter the outcome. But I couldn't imagine losing again. I wouldn't. Not this time. When the court resumed, everyone held their breath. The DNA test confirms, the judge said, looking directly at Margaret before continuing, that Miss Elena Hart is indeed the biological mother of Lily. A murmur erupted across the courtroom. Margaret's mask cracked just slightly, her lips twitched, her jaw tightened. For the first time she looked shaken. I didn't feel the rush of triumph I thought I would. I felt grief and then, a fierce protectiveness. This wasn't a game I'd won. This was a child I'd been cheated out of and a wound that would never fully heal. The judge continued, given the extreme circumstances surrounding the child's illegal adoption and the proven deceit, custody shall be returned to the biological mother pending a transition period, monitored by a court-appointed counselor. I burst into tears. Not from joy, but from the release of 4 years of pain, hope, and tireless struggle. I finally had my baby back. But I also had years to make up for and a bond to rebuild. Margaret didn't look at me as she was led out of the courtroom, but her silence said everything. She knew it was over. Her lies, her manipulation, they had finally collapsed under the weight of truth. When I stepped out of the building, reporters surrounded me. But all I could see was Lily holding the hand of the court counselor, staring at me with wide, uncertain eyes. She didn't recognize me. Not yet. But she would. And I would do everything in my power to make sure she never doubted again who her real mother was. She didn't know me, but I would give her every reason to. The first time Lily came to my home, she walked in cautiously, clutching the counselor's hand like a lifeline. Her little backpack, pink with unicorns, was too big for her small shoulders. I had imagined this moment for years, rehearsed it in my mind, even decorated her room 100 times in different colors. But nothing could have prepared me for the real thing. The space between us felt like 1,000 miles, though we were just a few feet apart. "Hi, sweetheart," I said softly, kneeling to her level. She looked at me, curious but quiet. Then, without a word, she stepped behind the counselor's leg. The pain was immediate and sharp. But I smiled. I had to. He was scared. And I was a stranger to her. That night, she slept in the room I'd kept ready for her all those years. The butterflies on the wall, the shelves filled with books I hoped she'd love one day, the blanket I had knitted after finding out I was pregnant. I watched her sleep from the doorway, tears streaming down my face. I had her back, but the time, the memories, the first words, the scraped knees, the lullabies, I couldn't get those back. The transition wasn't easy. Margaret had filled her head with stories. That I'd abandoned her. That I wasn't safe. That Margaret had rescued her. Made my stomach turn. Lily would flinch when I reached for her hand. She wouldn't eat my cooking. Some nights she'd cry for Nana, and beg to go back. It broke me. But I didn't blame her. She was just a child, caught in a nightmare she didn't choose. So I took it one moment at a time. I didn't push. I didn't force. I simply showed up, every single day. I picked her up from school and always brought her a juice box just the way she liked. I learned her favorite shows and watched them with her even when I hated them. I braided her hair while she wriggled and complained. I helped her with homework, cheered her on at soccer, and when she got sick, I sat by her bed all night with a cool cloth on her forehead. Slowly the walls began to crack. One day she came home with a drawing. It was of a stick figure family. A tall lady with long hair, a little girl, and a big sun smiling down. "That's us," she said simply, handing it to me. "You and me." I almost couldn't breathe. I framed that picture and hung it in the kitchen. That was the first time she called this place home. But it wasn't over. Margaret filed an appeal. She claimed I had manipulated the system, that Lily belonged with her. The media picked up the story. Some outlets painted me as a long-lost mother. Others sided with Margaret, calling her a hero grandmother. The worst day was when a journalist ambushed Lily at school. He came home crying, asking me if I really gave her away when she was a baby. I had to sit her down, hold her tiny hands in mine, and tell her the truth, in the softest, safest way I could. "No, baby. I didn't give you away. You were taken from me. And I never stopped looking for you." She looked into my eyes for a long moment. Then she did something I'd never forget. She reached up, wrapped her arms around my neck, and whispered, "I'm glad you found me." Those words became my anchor. We started therapy together. Not because we were broken, but because we deserved a safe space to heal. I had trauma and so did she. And we were going to face it, together. I watched her blossom. The fear in her eyes was replaced with laughter. He made friends. She asked questions about her baby pictures, her real birthday. She started calling me Mom without hesitation. And one day when I tucked her into bed, she asked me, "Will Nana go to jail?" I hesitated. "That's up to the judge, baby. But what matters is that you're safe now." She nodded. "I want to stay here forever." Tears burned my eyes. "You will." "I promise." But deep down I knew Margaret wasn't done. Not yet. The woman who stole my child thought she'd won. But karma had her own schedule. The final court hearing wasn't just a legal proceeding. It felt like the reckoning of everything I had suffered through. I walked into that courtroom with my head high, my daughter's tiny hand wrapped in mine. She wore a sky blue dress she'd picked herself and a small heart-shaped locket with our picture inside. I couldn't help but think, this was the moment everything would change. Margaret sat on the other side, her eyes cold, her mouth tight, dressed in a beige suit like she was still trying to play the polished matriarch. But the facade was cracking. Her lies had been exposed. The falsified adoption. The manipulation. The kidnapping masked in legality. Her social worker reports now painted her as emotionally manipulative and unfit. Her house, once described as safe, was now known for the screaming matches she had with her son, my ex, the one who still hadn't stepped foot into the courtroom to defend her or even ask about his daughter. She stood alone. But I didn't. I had a growing group of people in my corner. My lawyer, Lily's counselor, the guardian ad litem who had conducted home visits and vouched for the bond one had rebuilt with my daughter. Even Lily's teacher had submitted a written statement about the transformation in her behavior since she moved in with me. The judge, an older black woman with a no-nonsense tone, looked over the documents silently for what felt like forever. Then she peered over her glasses and addressed the court. In the matter of the contested custody and unlawful adoption of the minor, Lily Marie Carter, this court finds sufficient evidence of fraud, coercion, and emotional manipulation on the part of Margaret Carter. Custody is permanently granted to the biological mother, Hannah Woods. I gasped, hands flying to my mouth. Lily didn't understand all the legal words, but she grinned and whispered, "We won." I nodded, crying and laughing at the same time. "Yes, baby. We won." The judge wasn't finished. She added, "Furthermore, criminal charges for kidnapping, perjury, and obstruction of justice will be referred to the district attorney's office. This court is adjourned." Margaret's face went pale. The last look she gave me wasn't angry. It was hollow, like she finally understood the gravity of what she had done. She was arrested that afternoon. It hit the news quickly. The once proud woman who had stolen a child and masked it as a rescue was exposed nationwide. Public sympathy shifted, and suddenly the world saw what I'd always known. She wasn't a savior. She was a thief. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate her downfall. But I did take my daughter home for good this time. We planted a tree in our backyard that weekend. A small pear tree. Lily called it her forever tree. Every year, she said, we'd watch it grow, and remember how far we'd come. She now knew the truth about her birth, not in gory detail, but enough to know that her mom never abandoned her. And that the woman who tried to replace me didn't win. Months passed, then years. Lily blossomed. She made honor roll. She joined the school choir. She brought home drawings with Mommy and me, scrawled in pink crayon. On her 9th birthday, she stood in front of her friends and said, "I love my mom because she never gave up on me." That night, as I watched her blow out her candles, I whispered my own silent wish. "Thank you for bringing her back to me." Margaret was sentenced to 5 years in prison with parole eligibility in 3. She tried to appeal twice. Both were denied. I didn't attend her sentencing. I was too busy helping Lily with her science project. I never received an apology from her. Not that I expected one. People like Margaret don't believe they're wrong until the gavel falls. And even then they often still don't. But I didn't need her remorse. I had something better, my daughter. Today our house is filled with laughter. We've made new memories to replace the stolen ones. I still cry sometimes, especially when I see baby pictures and think about what I missed. But then Lily hugs me without warning or calls me just to say, "I love you," and I realize, we're building something stronger than what was taken. Love rebuilt on truth. Trust restored through time. And that's more powerful than any lie ever told. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you've ever lost something precious, know this. Justice doesn't always come quickly, but when it does, it changes everything. New stories drop daily. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one.